Pedro, I think you are in such a special position because a few years ago, you took on the role of CEO. What were your thoughts on the first day that you stepped into that position? Because that must have been quite something for you. You walk in there carrying the name is above the door. Tell us about your mindset on that first day as the CEO of the Carvajal enterprise.
Well, it was, I think, in 2019 the process started. I was running the packaging division at that time, which is the largest subsidiary that we have. And the former CEO asked me that if I wanted to participate because the delegate committee has seen the profile, and when they saw my experience, they said, your profile fits what they're looking for. They had talked to Egon Center, Korn Ferry, Spencer Stewart, several of these headhunters. Finally, it was Korn Ferry, and the whole process started. As you know, you get all these types of exams that you have to go through, and I went through all those exams. Then the whole interview process started, and I think I went through 5 or 6 interviews, and they were telling me after each stage how I was doing. Then in February of 2020, they told me I was in the final list, and then in March 30th of 2020, they told me that I was appointed CEO for the Carvajal organization. 2 days after that, all of our plants were closed. And I had gone through tough restructuring processes in my 20 years at Carvajal, and previously I worked in the financial sector. I also worked in a startup, so I had some experience managing rough waters, but I never had an experience of where I wake up in the morning and all the plants were actually closed. So it was very challenging, but the first thing that we said is we had to make sure our people were safe. And especially in Carvajal, where we have a very strong people centric culture, a caring culture.
So tell me, Pedro, like it's such an interesting phenomenon because as you said, like, your first day was really not like any first day should have gone because like, as you said, like 2 days later, basically you had a pandemic at your hand. Like, so it's like, you might think the worst time to take on a position like that because you get all the responsibility plus, to be fair, pretty much a worst case scenario, as you said, right? Like, so do you think it was actually a blessing in disguise that there was actually this much change on top of that crisis?
Something that I talked to the chairman of the board at that time, and he repeated it several times, is we have to make sure we come out stronger. And obviously, there was very long days. There was a lot of vulnerability, a lot of confusion of what was going on from all the news that we would get on a daily basis. And obviously, in Latin America, in Colombia, we're very fortunate that we have a very good health system, but that's not the case in other countries where we operate. And there was lines of people that couldn't make it to the hospital, and it was obviously family members and employees. But I would say that I had the opportunity to make a lot of very important changes very rapidly that I think that were needed. And coming in with this, with the chairman of the board and with the new dynamic that we had, I think it was an opportunity. And like we say, never let a good crisis go to waste.
What has fundamentally changed? What will never go back to how it was pre-pandemic or even before you took over? Like in your mind, like, what are the things where you're like, okay, we have firmly moved on from certain things that don't serve us anymore in the sort of, I guess, like the new world that we face after this massive global pandemic that we all experienced together?
During the pandemic, we saw that there was many disruptive forces and a lot of behavior modifications. And what we have done as a balance of where we stand today is that, for example, meetings where we need to make big decisions and have all the information have to be extremely productive from beginning to start. And we have to make sure that within 1 hour we're able to make the decision. That happened during the pandemic, which we were all virtual and it worked. And today we're working it the same way. There's other meetings where we think that the face to face is important. So we moved on to having this hybrid where some are virtual, some are personal meetings face to face. But I think the most important is that we have all the information, are extremely disciplined, and get and stay with the best that the pandemic gave us. And one of those things is that I think it made us more productive.
Do you think that your definition of success as the CEO of the company today differs from previous generations of your family? Do you think like, there's really been shifts?
Well, when I was growing up, and early teens, I think I started to sinking a lot more in the family conversations, um, and they repeated a lot about the Carvajal Foundation and the importance of the Carvajal Foundation. And obviously, at that time, nobody was talking about ESG. But one day, I remember I asked my father, "Do we have a foundation, or are we in the money making business? Because you talk about a lot about the foundation." And he said, "No, it's in the '60s. What we decided to do to give back to the community is that the largest shareholder of the company is the foundation." And then, can you please explain that a little more? Then, as I was growing up, then the term conscious capitalism started coming in. But these members of the third generation, led by Manuel Carvajal, in the early '60s started talking about this. And they said, and that's, I think it's totally incredible. And we're in 2023, and now we're talking about conscious capitalism and how important it is, and to have an ESG strategy. And I think that when we set our purpose, for example, and we say that we promote economic and social development by doing things right, the economic part is there, which is extremely important. We have to create value for the shareholders, but the social part is also as important as the economic.
How important do you think family involvement in the business side will be in order to promote this understanding also for future generations of the family?
Something that we've done quite well is that we've been working on the governance structure. And we have the role of the family council, which is extremely important for us. Now that we have over 320 members, we're in the sixth generation. And I think the president of the family council and the family council do an extremely good job of managing the family. Then we have the company, and the company has a board of directors. Out of those 9 board of directors, 5 are independent. And then we have the shareholders that, under the investors assembly, they have the clear role of working with those investors.
Do you make a conscious effort in saying like, okay, there's certain things I'm going to leave at the door. I'm not coming in as an owner. I'm really coming in as a CEO. Like, so what do you do in your mind? Do you compartmentalize, or do you accept that it's a glorious mess and you sort of like you manage it as it comes? Like, what is your strategy there? Because I know that this can be a massive struggle for many family business leaders who are family members as well and owners.
Yeah, I try to manage work life balance as much as I can. I think that we live in a relatively small city where we could be a big fish in a small pond, and we have to understand that role. But I think the most important mission that we have is, one, to behave with the highest integrity, to make sure that we live the family values and the business values, and as much as we can, balance what we have to do on the day to day, where we know that the sun is hitting our face 7 by 24, how we came in, what we said, how we said it, and that's all part of what, and we have to accept it. That's the reality. And when we get home, try to be very present at that moment with the role that we play with the family. I'm very fortunate that, although my wife is an entrepreneur and she has all the challenges of being an entrepreneur, she's extremely present with all the things that go around the our kids and the family. So I think she can work a lot more on that balance. But I think that we have to understand our role in society, in the company, in the family, and for me, the most important, independent of how challenging the times can be is always have the family values and the company values very present and behave with the highest integrity.
In all those areas, you face expectations, though. How do you experience the expectations that come with that visibility that you described just now?
I think that there's expectations from society, especially what we're going through in the country, that we're going through some challenging times in our country, also in our city, and they want us to step up to the plate to make sure that. And there's a phrase that I like to repeat a lot is face reality and deliver hope, because I think in these challenging times, they're looking at us to see, and depending on what they see in us, they can say, no, we're going to be fine. Because if that's not the message that we're trying to express, although we can have a lot of things in our head and we could be stressed out from many different reasons, we have to make sure that we know that we're always on stage.
You look back at your father, you look at your uncles and your grandparents. I think it's very visible and tangible for you to explain what kind of an impact they've had, right, on the business. I think it would be very easy for you to say, like, well, my father brought this to the table, my uncles and aunts did this and this and that. For you, which part of the story would you like to be the protagonist of, I think, when people look back?
To be honest, I don't think about it that much. The way I'm wired is the present, but I think that the most important part is that we live our purpose, and that every day, what the first, the second, the third generation taught us, we can serve as an example for future generations, that what we constructed helped construct the next 100 years. And like I said, whether it's the most profitable business that you can imagine, if it's not right fitting our purpose, we don't do it. We don't do it. I think that 20, 30 years looking back, I think continued with the legacy and prepared the company for the next 50 years. Because when you look back in what members of the third, second, and first generation did, I think they went through First World War. They went through the crisis of 1930s. They went to a Second World War, and I could go on because Latin America lives in a permanent convulsion. And so if I tell you what's going on in our three top markets, you'd say, but you must be going nuts. So we have a lot of adrenaline pumping every single day, and it's part of what keeps us, every morning awake and with a lot of energy to move forward.